And welcome back. This is WPEA 90.5 FM Exeter. You're listening to the School of Athens right now. I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I am Carter Otis.
And we are still waiting for Charlie Scales.
This is true. It seems like every week we're waiting for him to show up.
It's almost like this constant waiting. It's almost like this waiting, that goes on for an eternity that might never end.
Really? But we still have hope in the end that he'll show up.
We do. And we have hope every single day and every single week that someday, the next day, he might show up.
You know what this reminds me of?
Oh, what?
This reminds me of the play/book Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett.
Waiting for Godot. Interesting.
Yes.
Were they waiting for someone?
They were, and they continue to be.
Oh, wow. Was his name Godot?
Indeed. All right. So let's so to begin, it's Waiting for Godot is one of the classic works of existentialist philosophy. To give some background, Samuel Beckett, he was born in Ireland. He lived there for a lot of his life, and then he moved to France. So this was originally written in French, but we've translated it into English so that we can make some sense of it.
And was Samuel Beckett just like a playwright? Is that all he did?
Well, I mean, yeah, he did a lot. He had a lot going on, as a lot of people do. Yeah, playwright. But he also directed his own stuff. He was a poet. He was also a translator. Given that he spoke English and French. So he had a lot going on.
Gotcha.
He was also a member of the French Resistance. So he did a number of things.
Oh, wait. So what kind of period of time is this? Because existentialism is, I don't know, maybe 1800s, maybe 1900s, I guess.
Yeah. So this was written 1955, it appears. So, or 1956, depending on if you're talking about the play or the book. I believe the play was published first. So,
is there a difference between the play and the book?
I don't think so.
Is it just like the book was a more publishable version?
I think so. Yeah, because I don't think they sold the play. I think the play was something you had to buy tickets to, and then after the play got famous, he just turned the script into a book. So one of the most famous, often very cited works of philosophy. There's a lot going on here. It talks about life in general, the meaning of life, possibly religion and faith. It talks about action, inaction. There's a lot going on. It's also known for being exceedingly boring as a play. So we'll read some sections of it, especially the opening page in a little bit. But the general plot is that there are two men, Vladimir and Estragon. They're both relatively poor, as far as we know, and they're just in this barren landscape. In some productions, there's a tree. In some, the play references like a ditch in some parts, but there's really not that much going on. Very barren landscape. And they sit around all day doing various nonsensical things. They trade hats. There's a big section where Vladimir is trying to get his boot off. A lot of nothing happens. So much so that this play has actually been termed the play where nothing happens twice, because it's a two-act play. But so these two men are waiting around forever, and we come to find out because one of them asks, "Hey, why are we waiting?" And the other says, "Well, we're here because we're waiting for Godot." No context is ever given as to who Godot is, why they're waiting, why they continue to wait. But they wait around all day, and then towards the end of the day, they see someone in the distance. They think it's Godot. They approach. It turns out it's a little boy. And the boy says, "I come from Godot, and I have unfortunate news. Godot is not able to make it today, but he promises that without fail, he will be here tomorrow." The two men say, "Okay," and they go their separate ways. They fall asleep. They play, and the second act comes back on the second day. Same thing happens. They sit around for a while. These two other guys show up, Lucky and Pazzo, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Nothing really happens. More nonsense, more trading of hats. And then the boy comes again, says, "Mr. Godot is not available to come today, but he will without fail make it tomorrow." And the two of them say, "Okay." And then so the play ends on a similar note. They're just doing nothing all day, and eventually hopefully something would happen, but not during the play. The play is awfully repetitive. So I think we can open just to give readers who haven't read this before or heard of it. Aavik and I will read you the first page or two, right, Aavik?
Absolutely. And just a quick reminder, as this is a very small play, there are two characters, Vladimir and Estragon. Carter, would you like to be Vladimir or would you like to be Estragon?
You know what? I'll take Vladimir, and I can do stage directions as well. So you get Estragon.
All right. I'm so happy to get Estragon. Okay. So Act 1, set the scene.
Act 1. Okay. A country road, a tree. Evening. Estragon, sitting on a low mound, is trying to take off his boot. He pulls at it with both hands, panting. He gives up, exhausted, rests, tries again. As before. Enter Vladimir.
Nothing to be done.
Vladimir, advancing with short, stiff strides, legs wide apart. I'm beginning to come round to that opinion. All my life I've tried to put it from me, saying, Vladimir, be reasonable. You haven't yet tried everything. And I resume the struggle. He broods, musing on the struggle, turning to Estragon. So there you are again.
Am I?
I'm glad to see you back. I thought you were gone forever.
Me too.
Together again at last. We'll have to celebrate this. But how? Get up till I embrace you.
Not now, not now.
May one inquire where His Highness spent the night?
In a ditch.
A ditch? Where?
Over there.
And they didn't beat you?
Beat me? Certainly they beat me.
The same lot as usual?
The same... I don't know.
When I think of it, all these years, but for me, where would you be? You'd be nothing more than a little heap of bones at the present minute, no doubt about it.
And what of it?
Too much for one man. On the other hand, what's the good of losing heart now? That's what I say. We should have thought of it 1,000,000 years ago, in the 90s.
Stop blathering and help me off with this bloody thing.
So this play continues for a bit as Estragon complains about his boot, and the two of them try and help him get it off, and then they eventually get it off, and they kind of just wander around a little bit and really just do whatever. And it's only on the 6th page, so after, I guess if you're watching maybe 10-ish minutes, that you finally hear what happened, like why they're there. So, Aavik, if you want to join me on the second mention of the word Godot, other than the title, so the real first mention is at the beginning of the 7th page.
Mm-hmm.
So here, you want to start before at the charming spot?
Absolutely. So Estragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Charming spot. But to give context, he has not moved at all, really. He's just taken about 3 steps from where the play starts. He's gotten up. He's essentially taken 3 steps, and he's right now in the center of the stage. And so nothing's really changed in his current position. But nevertheless, he goes, charming spot. Inspiring prospects. Let's go.
We can't.
Why not?
We're waiting for Godot.
You're sure it was here?
What?
That we were to wait.
He said by the tree. Do you see any others?
What is it?
I don't know. A willow?
Where are the leaves?
It must be dead.
No more weeping.
Or perhaps it's not the season.
Looks to me more like a bush.
A shrub.
A bush.
What are you insinuating? That we've come to the wrong place?
He should be here.
And then the dialogue continues like this for a while, where they bicker about what the tree is and what's happening. So,
oh wait, can we go on for just a couple more lines?
Oh, please.
Oh yeah. He should be here.
He didn't say for sure he'd come.
And if he doesn't come?
Well, we'll come back tomorrow.
And then the day after tomorrow.
Possibly.
And so on.
The point is...
Until he comes.
You're merciless.
We came here yesterday.
So there you're mistaken.
What did we use yesterday?
What did we do yesterday?
Yes.
Why, nothing is certain when you're about.
In my opinion, we were here.
You recognize this place?
I didn't say that.
Well...
That makes no difference.
All the same. That tree, that bog...
You're sure it was this evening?
What?
That we were to wait?
He said Saturday, I think.
You think?
I must have made a note of it.
But what Saturday? And is it Saturday? Is it not rather Sunday? Or Monday? Or Friday?
It's not possible.
Or Thursday.
What'll we do?
If he came yesterday and we weren't here, you may be sure he won't come again today.
But you say we were here yesterday.
I may be mistaken. Let's stop talking for a minute. Do you mind?
So this is essentially this is the short form version of the play. They bicker meaninglessly about things, but one thing that you do get from the meaninglessness that happens here is the meaninglessness, right? There's no context to their life. There's nothing they have to get to. They have no job, no school, no family that we know of. All we know is Estragon sleeps in the ditch. Vladimir sleeps somewhere else, and every day he comes back. And they wait. They don't know what day it is, and they don't know why they're waiting, or at least they don't say.
Well, they know they're waiting for Godot, right?
Right, but they don't know what Godot's going to do for them, or they don't mention who Godot is, or why they're waiting, or why they're so faithful to wait for him. So, one of the first impressions that you get when you read this play is, man, this is meaningless. This is just random ramblings. I don't know. Any opinions on that? You hearing anything profound or just meaninglessness?
Well, I want to say that the profundity might be in the meaninglessness. Ooh, that's a fun word, isn't it?
Please expand.
So, they're waiting for Godot, right?
Right.
And if we look at, mentions of Godot to the entire thing, every time Godot's mentioned, they always have a very repetitive kind of dialogue. Vladimir goes, stop talking, Estragon. You gave me a fright. I thought it was he. Who? Godot. Ah, the wind in the reeds. I quit a sore and I heard shouts. And why would he shout? At his horse. And then there's silence. And then Estragon suddenly goes, I'm hungry. So it seems like the play has very little meaning, of course. Like a couple times Estragon asks, oh, wait, his name is Godot? Which, very repetitive, very meaninglessness that not even the characters themselves remember what's happening. A big theme in this piece is actually on memory and why characters do remember or don't remember certain things, certain days. If our viewers remember, they didn't know what day it even was. And so all of the world almost seems to lose meaning as they're doing this one specific thing, waiting for Godot day after day. I don't know, seems kind of a Sisyphean task.
Right. Sisyphean?
Sisyphean, I think, right?
Like Sisyphus.
Like Sisyphus. And as a brief reference, Carter, who's Sisyphus?
Oh, Sisyphus was a member of Greek mythology, a person who was condemned and punishment to continually roll a boulder to the top of the hill. However, when it got to the top of the hill, it would fall back down again, and he'd have to go all the way to the bottom and push the boulder way back up to the top of the hill. So Sisyphean is used to describe any task that's overly repetitive to the point of meaninglessness.
And it was actually used by a famous existentialist and arguably absurdist, absurdist being someone who's interested in the philosophy of absurdism.
Which is another episode entirely.
Which I believe that we have kind of covered. We've done an episode on existentialism.
Yeah, we've done something similar, but absurdism is a very big topic in general. So
right. So absurdism essentially, or the person who wrote about Sisyphus first and connected it to the human condition was my man Albert Camus, French existentialist, writer, great guy. Actually, I don't know if he was a great guy personally, but he wrote stuff like The Stranger, Myth of Sisyphus, books along the lines of Nothing Really Matters, and so his magnum opus almost is considered The Myth of Sisyphus, where he ends the book with the very famous line, "We must imagine Sisyphus as happy," or one must imagine Sisyphus as happy.
Right, and the idea being that despite the repetition and like the quotidian efforts of daily life, that he is happy. He's happy accomplishing tasks that from far away we might say that's meaningless and that's repetitive. But Camus' implicit argument in that is like, well, people do the same things too, right? Like we're sitting here and we're looking at Vladimir and Estragon and we're saying, wow, that's really pointless. Like they sit around waiting for something to happen. Nothing happens. They have this meaningless dialogue, and they never do anything important or lasting. But some higher being above us might be saying, "Look at these little beings. Like they don't do anything. Like they go to work all day, and then they go home, and nothing changes. They have no impact. They have the same dialogue every day with the same people, and nothing ever changes. So, do you think that's part of what Beckett's trying to get at here? Is a little kind of absurd comedic way of telling people like, hey, they're not so different from you?
I think so. I think a part of this is along the lines of, not necessarily that, oh, they're not so different from you, but, because some of these characters are, they just feel strange, right? Like Estragon forgets things that have been said 5 lines beforehand, right? And there's a lot of strange activity happening where characters will suddenly get angry or suddenly get like depressed or suddenly do something, which all seems, and they all seem to be in on it, in that no one actually says that, oh, this doesn't actually make sense. And so I don't know if we can particularly say that they're like us, but I can say that what they're doing is as what we do. Because if you do truly believe that, for instance, there is no God, as many existentialists have, that there is no inherent meaning to life, as many existentialists do, not in a depressing sense, but more in the sense of, we're here not for any particular reason, but we are here, then ultimately Camus would say that you have to enjoy this like meaningless cycle, and derive some meaning from it, which it appears that these two people are. They're waiting for Godot. That's the reason that they're waiting. Even though it's the same thing over and over again, even though it's ultimately meaninglessness, at least as viewers see it, they are waiting for something. They're waiting for my man Godot, despite Godot never showing up. And actually, an interesting analysis or interpretation of this whole waiting for Godot deal is Godot. Carter, what happens when you take off the last 2 letters of Godot?
I was about to bring that up. I think we can more fully discuss religion after a quick break, I feel, because religion is more than a brief conversation, maybe more like 30 minutes instead of 10. So we'll come back. We'll talk about Godot and religion and whether this gibberish actually means anything. Please stay tuned. This is School of Athens.
And we are back. Welcome. This is WPEA 90.5 FM Exeter, Big Red Radio. School of Athens, I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I'm Carter Otis, and we are still waiting for our Godot, Charlie Scales, to come back from Japan. But next term, he'll be back with us. This is our last episode without him. So while we're waiting, let's talk more about waiting.
Absolutely. So we left off with what happens. We have these people who are waiting for this thing that'll never happen, waiting for this guy.
Well, we don't know if it'll never happen. It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened.
He'll surely come tomorrow.
Okay. But then, so he'll come at some point, and his name is Godot, which I'd say, sounds a little familiar, especially and Godot being spelled Godot because French. And so I'd say that if you drop the last 2 letters, it sounds a little familiar, right?
It does. Sounds like the almighty God that we're talking about. Which is interesting because it makes sense in this context, right? Vladimir and Estragon have this kind of weird ultimate faith in Godot. Despite having no contact with Godot, they have no idea when he'll show up, what he'll do, why they're waiting. And the viewer, reader, depending on if it's the play or the script, has no idea why they're waiting or why they're so devoted. And so this does appear like it's a metaphor for religion, right? Coming from Beckett, who I believe is an atheist, he has a lot of life is meaningless type quotes, which are not common from religious people. That it seems like it's a critique of people who are waiting for God instead of waiting for Godot, right? People who are waiting for God to save them or God to appear to them or some sort of savior to come into their life and change everything, right? Because that is similar to what it seems, right? And that's why people who say, well, Godot is very close to God. If he didn't want that association, he obviously knew what he was doing by giving the name. If he didn't want that association, he would have given the character a different name.
Right. Okay. So then I think it's pretty well-meaning that we can just say that Samuel Beckett meant God because, one, of course, Godot is pretty much God, but also just because of the immense amount of parallels that we see between what it means for, waiting for someone who you must just simply have faith will come one day. And in fact, waiting for Godot happens it happens in Christianity. I'd say that's a pretty big part of Christianity, is that whole deal of
waiting
for a second coming, right? Even in Islam, you are waiting for the Prophet Muhammad. In Hinduism, you're waiting for the Dashavatar. In Buddhism, I don't know if you're waiting for anything. Actually, in Buddhism, you're just trying to get out of this cycle of suffering. So,
well, in Judaism as well, you're waiting for the next Messiah to appear, right?
Well, the first Messiah to appear, right?
Right. The true Messiah, I guess.
Yeah, not that Jesus Christ guy.
No. He's cool, but not him. See, I hear your point, and you'd like to think that. But after publishing this, Samuel Beckett specifically said, and I quote, "If by Godot I had meant God, I would have said God and not Godot." So he was very particular after this. Of course, he might just be messing with people. I really wouldn't put it past Samuel Beckett. But he was very particular to tell people, no, that's not what I meant.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I feel like even if we could separate the artist from the art, right?
Sure. Yeah, I guess we talked about art before. Art is what it means to you, if that's what you take away. But taking religion out of this, it is interesting as just a warning against inaction in general, right? The two characters throughout the entire play do very little of their own accord, right? They take their boots off, they swap hats at one point, but there's very little that they do that isn't something that happens to them, right? They're kind of just waiting for something. They're waiting for things to happen onto them, right? They're not going out into the world and creating their own action. So to me, this is also like a warning from Beckett against people who live meaningless lives, right? Who lives lives like this, where they have the same routine and they have no dreams, nothing that they're aspiring to. They just are waiting for some act of God or even some other character, some third party, to come and do something to them that they will react to, something positive or negative. And I think Beckett here is saying that's not how life is lived. Like, if you look at these two, like, this is not the model of what life is. Life is you should be going out and doing your own thing, following your dreams, and not just waiting for something to happen to you.
Okay, so kind of I guess a stance against inaction. But Carter, wouldn't inaction kind of be an action by itself?
That's a good point. Well, I mean, it kind of depends. Are we talking about inaction or waiting, right? Because let's say if I'm if I'm sitting at a bus stop waiting for the bus, I would call waiting a conscious action, right? I am sitting at the bus stop and I'm choosing to stay where I am. I know I could walk away or try and walk to my destination, but I'm choosing to stay and wait for the bus to arrive. Similar to waiting for Godot, I guess. I do wonder more about inaction, though, because I wonder, are they choosing inaction? Because I feel like that's different than being like a conscious bystander, right? If you see something horrible happening, but you decide not to do anything, you decide not to step in, that inaction is a choice. But I wonder if the inaction here is a choice or if it's just a mindset simply.
Okay. It's in the sense that they simply, because of the people that they are and their temperament, they wouldn't be able to leave even if they presumably kind of wanted to.
Right, yeah, or they don't seem to have the kind of mindset that would allow them to dream big enough to hope for something like this.
Well, I mean, okay, we talk about this whole, it might be an allegory. What would leaving mean in this allegory? If this thing about waiting for all of eternity, waiting, and going through the meaningless motions of our modern day-to-day repetitive lives, despite it being meaningless, what would leaving constitute?
Leaving would be taking agency in your own life, right? So if this metaphor of waiting for Godot is waiting for something to happen to you, waiting for a promotion to happen at your job, or waiting for you to get lucky and something else grand happens to you, or even just life in general, not something positive, that you're not making any action in the world. You're just some sort of inanimate robotic object that's receiving the actions of other people. Leaving or not waiting for Godot, that would be them choosing to follow their own dreams, right? Rather than wait for Godot as they've been told. Leaving, forgetting about Godot, is them taking agency in their own lives, right?
Okay. So then, I suppose that makes sense. Are we supposed to expect that Godot actually will never show up then?
Well, that's interesting. Let's go to the portion where we finally have Boy who shows up.
Oh, my favorite, my boy, literally the boy.
Just Boy. So I think this is page 43 is the first mention of Boy.
And boy, to be clear, is just his like casting direction. Like he's just called boy.
He's just Boy. Yeah, that's
Is his name Boy or is he just a boy?
Let me see. At the beginning of the play, when it names all the people, it just says a boy in lowercase. So
Wow, not even capitalized.
no.
Personally, I wouldn't take that.
Right. Okay, so let's see. Our first mention of Boy, yeah, 43. You see where we're at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any preference of which character you're playing this time?
I think I'd love to be boy.
Okay, you be Boy, and then would you like either Estragon or Vladimir?
I can take Estragon as well.
Okay, and then I'll take Vladimir and the stage directions. All right, please begin.
Of course. Estragon. Why didn't they recognize us then?
That means nothing. I too pretended not to recognize them, and then nobody ever recognizes us.
Oh, and just to be clear, them and us, or them, is these people, Pazzo and Lucky, who showed up earlier in the play. Some stuff happened with them. Nothing really happened with them.
Yeah, we can get to that later if we have time. For now, yeah, forget. There's no plot to that. There's very little plot to the whole story. Just ignore that for now. Forget it. What we need. Ow.
Unless they're not the same. Actually, sorry, we switched characters, I think, Carter.
Oh, apologies. Yes, please. Yeah, and then nobody ever recognizes us.
Forget it. What we need. Ow.
Unless they're not the same?
Didi. It's the other foot. And Didi is a pet name for Vladimir?
Right. Yeah, Didi and Gogo.
I go hobbling towards the mound. There's a mound in this field somewhere.
Which is kind of center stage in the production. Unless they're not the same.
And then Boy, kind of off stage. Mister.
Estragon halts, and the both of them look back towards the voice.
Off we go again.
Approach, my child. The boy enters timidly and then stops.
Mr. Albert?
Yes.
Estragon, what do you want?
Approach. And the boy doesn't move.
Estragon, forcibly. Approach when you're told, can't you?
The boy advances timidly and then halts. Vladimir, what is it?
Boy, Mr. Godot.
Obviously. Approach.
Estragon, will you approach?
The boy advances timidly.
What kept you so late?
You have a message from Mr. Godot.
Boy, yes, sir.
Well, what is it?
Estragon, what kept you so late?
The boy looks at them in turn, not knowing to which he should reply. To Estragon, Vladimir says, let him alone.
Estragon responds violently, you let me alone.
Advancing toward the boy, he says,
do you know what time it is?
The boy recoils and says,
it's not my fault, sir. Estragon, and whose is it? Mine? The boy responds, I was afraid, sir. Estragon, afraid of what? Of us? Answer me.
I know what it is. He was afraid of the others.
Estragon, how long have you been here? The boy responds, a good while, sir.
You were afraid of the whip. The whip was a prop from earlier with Lucky and Pazzo, one of whom was a donkey, I believe, or pretending to be a donkey.
Donkey/slave. It was interesting.
It was an interesting, yeah. Well, I promise you guys we'll get to that in a bit.
You were afraid of the whip? The boy responds, yes, sir.
The roars.
Yes, sir.
The two big men?
Yes, sir.
Do you know them?
No, sir.
Are you a native of these parts? Do you belong to these parts?
Yes, sir. Estragon, that's all a pack of lies. Grabs the boy by the arm, shaking him. Tell us the truth. The boy, trembling. But it is the truth, sir.
Will you let him alone? What's the matter with you? Estragon releases the boy and moves away, covering his face with his hands. Vladimir and the boy observe him. Estragon drops his hands. His face is convulsed. What's the matter with you?
I'm unhappy.
Not really? Since when?
I'd forgotten.
Extraordinary, the tricks that memory plays.
Again, we see memory as a theme. Estragon tries to speak. He gives up, limps down to his place, and starts taking off his boots again, or at least trying to. And to the boy.
Vladimir says, well?
Mr. Godot.
I've seen you before, haven't I?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know me.
No, sir.
It wasn't you who came yesterday.
No, sir.
This is your first time?
Yes, sir.
Words. Speak.
Mr. Godot told me to tell you he won't come this evening, but surely will tomorrow.
Is that all?
Yes, sir.
You work for Mr. Godot?
Yes, sir.
What do you do?
I mind the goats, sir.
Is he good to you?
Yes, sir.
He doesn't beat you.
No, sir, not me.
Whom does he beat?
He beats my brother, sir.
Ah, you have a brother.
Yes, sir.
What does he do?
He minds the sheep, sir.
And why doesn't he beat you?
I don't know, sir.
He must be fond of you.
I don't know, sir.
Does he give you enough to eat? Does he feed you well?
Fairly well, sir.
You're not unhappy. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well,
I don't know, sir.
you don't know if you're unhappy or not?
No, sir.
You're as bad as myself. Where do you sleep?
In the loft, sir.
With your brother?
Yes, sir.
In the hay?
Yes, sir.
All right, you may go.
What am I to tell Mr. Godot, sir?
Tell him you saw us. You did see us, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
He steps back, hesitates, turns and exits running. The light suddenly fails. In a moment, it is night. The moon rises at the back, mounts in the sky, stands still, shedding a pale light on the scene. So, as you can see, the dialogue here, equally meaningless. We see Vladimir questioning the boy for no real reason. But as Aavik said before, the theme of memory is very important. So neither of them remember if there was a previous day. Vladimir says the boy looks familiar, and he's not sure if the boy came earlier. The boy is certain that he didn't come earlier, but he has a brother who looks like him, and that might have been the guy. But you can see it's all very hazy. None of them are super lucid in this moment. There's no context that's happening. There's, it's all similar to the scenery being very barren, the set being very bare. The dialogue is also very bare. There's nothing to know, nothing to see.
Exactly. And we also kind of see a little bit of that God symbolism. If you guys remember, this boy minds the goats, and his brother minds the sheep. And in Christian, I really want to say mythology, but in Christian symbolism, goats represent the sinners of the world, I believe, and sheep represent the ones who are saved. And Jesus is a shepherd.
Right. Jesus as a shepherd is a metaphor for him guiding the people who wait for him to guide them, to the promised land, to heaven and all that jazz, right?
And if his brother is guiding the sheep, if his brother is the shepherd, then his brother is Jesus. And if God is angry or beats his the brother or beats Jesus, that could be a representation or an allusion to Jesus dying for our sins.
Ooh, it certainly could. An interesting interpretation there. Yes, I guess you have to be well read on the Bible. But so what do we see from this scene? We see that still, like the reader had at the beginning, the Vladimir and Estragon have very little context to anything that's happening.
They have, they're going through the exact same motions. They seem to refer to this boy as someone who's come before. They seem to know something, but at the same time, nothing about this boy. They're asking him all the same questions. The boy is yet again kicking the can down the road with his, Mr. Godot will come tomorrow, surely. Right.
And so worse than not knowing, we just have this uncertainty where it's rather than we're not sure if he's going to come, we have this he promises he will come, but it seems like they've been waiting for days or an unspecified amount since no one can remember, and he still hasn't shown up. So I think we might take a quick break now, and we'll look for Godot ourselves. We'll see if he shows up. In the meantime, enjoy a quick little PSA, and we'll be back to talk about what happens and continue.
We are back. This is WPEA 90.5 FM, Exeter, Big Red Radio, School of Athens. I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I am Carter Otis, and we're still waiting on Charlie Scales.
Speaking of waiting, we've been talking about Waiting for Godot, the revolutionary play by Samuel Beckett about two men who just keep on waiting for our man, Godot. Right.
So earlier we talked about, so we've got two main characters, Estragon and Vladimir. Later on, boy shows up, but we kind of sidestepped the other two characters that briefly appear. We have Pazzo and Lucky. So, Aavik, that's on page 16 of the PDF. So we can read this bit. We'll see what interpretation we can get from it. So, preferences on who you want to read?
Well, I don't think Lucky has too many words, unless Lucky says a couple of things, and they are very long things. So,
that's true. That's true. Well, we can start the scene. We can see what happens. I can read Pazzo and Vladimir, I guess.
And I'll be Estragon and Lucky.
Okay, and you want to do stage directions then?
Absolutely.
Okay. Here, start with enter Pazzo and Lucky then, right?
Of course. So, and this is, you said, on the 16th page?
16th page, yes.
Enter Pazzo and Lucky. Pazzo drives Lucky by means of a rope passed around his neck, so that Lucky is the first to enter, followed by the rope, which is long enough to let him reach the middle of the stage before Pazzo enters. Lucky carries a heavy bag, a folding stool, a picnic basket, and a greatcoat. Pazzo, a whip.
Pazzo from off stage. On!
There's a crack of the whip. Pazzo appears. They cross the stage. Lucky passes before Vladimir and Estragon and exit. Pazzo, at the sight of Vladimir and Estragon, stops short. The rope tautens. Pazzo jerks at it violently.
Back!
Noise of Lucky following it with all his baggage. Vladimir and Estragon turn towards him, half wishing, half fearing to go to his existence. Vladimir takes a step towards Lucky. Estragon holds him back by the sleeve.
Let me go.
Stay where you are.
Pazzo. Be careful. He's wicked.
Vladimir and Estragon turn towards Pazzo.
With strangers.
Estragon, in an undertone. Is that him?
Who? Godot?
Yes.
Pazzo. I present myself. Pazzo. Not at all.
He said Godot.
Not at all.
To Pazzo, Estragon says, You're not Mr. Godot, sir?
Pazzo. I am Pazzo. Pazzo. Does that name mean nothing to you? I say, does that name mean nothing to you?
Vladimir and Estragon look at each other questioningly. Estragon, pretending to search. Pazzo.
Pazzo. Pazzo says, Pazzo!
Ah, Pazzo. Let me see. Pazzo?
Is it Pazzo or Bazo?
Pazzo. No, I'm afraid I don't seem to. Pazzo advances threateningly.
And briefly here we see Estragon forget information that he learned not 5 lines ago. So another theme of forgetfulness. Vladimir says, I once knew a family called Gazo. The mother had the clap.
Estragon hastily. We're not from these parts, sir.
Pazzo, you are human beings, nonetheless. As far as one can see,
He takes off his glasses.
of the same species as myself.
He bursts into an enormous laugh.
Of the same species as Pazzo, made in God's image. Vladimir, well, you see, Pazzo, who is Godot?
Godot?
You took me for Godot. Oh, no, sir, not for an instant, sir. Who is he? He's a kind of acquaintance.
Estragon. Nothing of the kind. We hardly know him.
True, we don't know him very well. But all the same.
Personally, I wouldn't even knew him if I saw him.
But you took me for him.
That's Pazzo saying that.
Yes.
And Estragon, that's to say, you understand the dusk, the strain, waiting. I confess, I imagined for a second.
Waiting? So you were waiting for him, Vladimir. Well, you see, Pazzo, here, on my land, Vladimir, we didn't intend any harm.
Estragon, we meant well.
Pazzo, this road is free to all. Vladimir, well, that's how we looked at it. Pazzo, it's a disgrace, but there you are.
Estragon, nothing we can do about it. And then here's quite a monologue by Pazzo, and I think it's a bit of a almost showy kind of thing.
Yeah, so it seems kind of from the vibe that happens afterwards that Pazzo is some sort of circus master, and Lucky is his pet. Lucky as well is a person. He's a human, but he has this rope around his neck, almost like he's a donkey because he's carrying all the stuff. And so yeah, this big kind of charade thing happens, and then we'll pick it up right after that.
It's a lot of dominance. It's a show of dominance almost Pazzo has over Lucky, where he orders him to do some stuff with, picking up, putting down a basket, laying out food,
Right.
stuff like that.
So the baggage that they were referring to earlier that Lucky was carrying in was this stool that Pazzo sits on, this picnic basket, all this stuff that he's carrying for him.
Now, Vladimir and Estragon have a bit of a conversation about, who actually is Lucky, and they say, he's got this thing on his neck. It's the chafing. Vladimir calls him a trifle effeminate. Estragon calls him a half-wit. Vladimir calls him a half-wit. Estragon calls him a cretin. Vladimir calls him a goiter. Estragon says he's not certain. And then there's this constant back and forth. And then suddenly Pazzo interrupts and asks them to leave Lucky in peace. And Estragon then throws some food to... Estragon throws some food. Lucky eats... Pazzo. Wow, a lot of characters. Pazzo eats some of that food. And then Estragon asks if he is done with the bones. And he then asks if Pazzo could give the bones, I believe. Vladimir does speak out against the treatment of Lucky, where he says something on all the way middle of page 22, to treat a man like that. I think, no, a human being, no, it's a scandal. But then Pazzo gives this very heartfelt kind of thing where he talks about, he talks about a lot of things, which is to say he also talks about nothing at all. He talks about smoking. It's the nicotine. One absorbs it in spite of one's precautions. But perhaps you don't smoke. And then goes on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of just odd banter that's happening. They're kind of cautiously sticking up for the rights of Lucky, and they're not sure what Lucky's condition is. They're concerned with the treatment that's happening. I wanted to skip, I'm trying to find it, to the part where Lucky briefly becomes somewhat normalish again. Aha, here we are, 37.
Not even normalish, he becomes something more.
So, yes, let's... it's hard to find a starting place because all of this dialogue is so similar.
Well, I think we can, on the 36, where Vladimir asks Pazzo to tell him to think.
Vladimir to Pazzo, tell him to think, Pazzo. Give him his hat.
And him is meaning Lucky at this
Lucky,
point.
yes. Give Lucky's hat. Vladimir, his hat? Pazzo, he can't think without his hat. Vladimir to Estragon, give him his hat.
Estragon, me? After what he did to me? Never. And we actually skip part of the thing where Lucky kicks Estragon after Estragon tries to help him.
Vladimir, I'll give it to him. He doesn't move. This is a theme that we see a lot during the play. It's how the play ends, spoiler alert. We'll read that at the very end. But a lot of this happens where a character announces an action in a real dramatic fashion and nothing happens.
Then Estragon to Pazzo, tell him to go and fetch it.
Pazzo, it's better to give it to him. Vladimir, I'll give it to him. He picks up the hat and tenders it at arm's length to Lucky, who does not move. Pazzo, you must put it on his head.
And I think we can skip forward a couple of lines. There's a lot of back and forth about the hat. But then Vladimir goes behind Lucky, slowly puts the hat on his head and runs away in case Lucky kicks him. Then Estragon says, what's he waiting for?
Pazzo, stand back. Vladimir and Estragon move away from Lucky. Pazzo jerks the rope. Lucky looks at Pazzo. Think, pig. Pause. Lucky begins to dance. Stop. Lucky stops. Forward. Lucky advances. Stop. Lucky stops. Think.
Silence. And then, suddenly, Lucky. On the other hand, with regard to...
Stop. Pazzo stops Lucky and says, back. Lucky moves back. Stop. And Lucky stops. Turn. Lucky turns towards the auditorium. Think.
Now, there are a couple of stage directions where during this extremely long tirade, which we'll get through very quickly, Vladimir and Estragon first all pay attention. Then Vladimir and Estragon start to protest. Pazzo kind of feels as if he's suffering. And then Pazzo starts groaning. And then suddenly Vladimir and Estragon are protesting violently. and then they all, Pazzo pulls on the rope, and then they all try and wrestle his hat off. Now, what exactly is it he said?
So after Pazzo, he starts talking. Pazzo says, stop. He makes him turn towards the audience, and Lucky says,
Given the existence, as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman, of a personal god, qua, 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 with white beard, qua, 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 outside time, without extension, who from the heights of divine apatheia, divine amphibia, divine aphasia, loves us dearly with some exceptions, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda, with those whose, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torrent, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can doubt it will, fire the firmament, that is to say, blast hell to heaven, so blue, still, and calm, so calm with a calm which, even though intermittent, is better than nothing, and not so fast in considering what is more than as a result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by the Academy of Anthropometry of Essie and Posse of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt, that is then, which clings to the labors of man, that as a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard, it is established as hereinafter, but not so fast for reasons unknown, that as a result of the
as impressive as you are on this, in the interest of time, this speech goes on for another page, and has no real point. He cites a bunch of people, says a bunch of dramatic things. There's some stuttering that happens, as we saw, some repetition, but it's kind of hard to understand what happens. But basically, what is taken away from this scene is that Lucky is completely subordinate. He's got the rope around his neck, and he's made to do tricks. He's made to dance. He's basically humiliated through all of this. And then Vladimir and Estragon are curious and say, what else can he do? Well, they say, Pazzo says, well, he can think. That's his big trick, is he can think. And so he turns Lucky towards the audience, tells him to think, and Lucky goes off. He goes crazy.
But he says a lot of stuff, and I don't know if any of it means anything.
Anything to the reader. I mean, it seems to mean something to him. It seems to him like he's making a great point. But it's hard to know because think isn't interpreted as just like have a consciousness. Think is like he's expounding on something.
Right. And I actually wrote a bit of an analysis on this because Carter, you and I both took a specific class at Phillips Exeter.
We did. We both took the existentialism class. For any students listening or teachers listening, I guess, go to the class, teach the class, do the class. It's a good class.
It's a fantastic class. In the class, we, of course, read Waiting for Godot along with a lot of other texts. And as part of this interpretation, Carter, I want to, there's a lot to unpack here, but I want us to first direct our attention towards the beginning of Lucky's speech and the end of the play. That is the end of Act 2. And we can finish off with saying how the play concludes and everything. But as a segue, Lucky starts by saying, given the existence of a personal god with white beard, outside time without extension, who from the heights of divine apathy loves us dearly. That kind of description is a very quintessential Christian God description, right? And so the personal God, which personal God is a God that talks to you, right? And so not a God that has to go through a priest either, but a God that you have a personal connection with, which is true for some sects of Christianity. With white beard, that's a very typical, almost colloquial image of God. Outside time, without extension, loves us. That's a very Christian God kind of thing. And he goes on and he goes on. Now, I want us, of course, Vladimir and Estragon and Pazzo are listening to this, going to the very end of the play, going towards the very end of Act 2. Act 2, so what we've talked about so far.
But before we move on, just to finally analyze Lucky's big speech.
This is part of the analysis.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
Just connecting all the way to the end of Act 2, where Vladimir and Estragon go through the day again. Pazzo and Lucky show up again. I don't think Lucky gives his big speech again. Slightly different things happen, but at the same time, nothing different happens. But then after all that, the boy, if we remember, that's how Act 1 ended, the boy comes around again, and Vladimir seems slightly more aware this time around. But still nothing changes. Because when Vladimir goes to the boy and starts asking him, "Oh, it wasn't you that came yesterday." The boy says, "No, sir." Vladimir asks, "Oh, this is your first time?" The boy says, "Yes, sir." Very, very familiar to what we've heard before. Vladimir knows, "You have a message for Mr. Godot." The boy says, "Yes, sir." Vladimir, he won't come this evening.
Right. Vladimir predicts this in advance. He seems to remember finally what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And now Right after, if you scroll down a little further, Vladimir asks, "How is your brother?" The boy says he's sick. Vladimir says, "Perhaps it was he that came yesterday." "Boy, I don't know, sir." And here is where something special happens. Vladimir says, very softly, "Has he a beard, Mr. Godot?" The boy says, "Yes, sir." Vladimir asks, "Fair or black?" And the boy says, "I think it's white, sir." And there's silence, and Vladimir suddenly exclaims, "Christ, have mercy on us." And if you all remember, so this Mr. Godot has a white beard, and then for some reason, Vladimir is suddenly saying the Lord's name, maybe in vain, maybe not. But Vladimir's inquisition as to a white beard directly connects to Pozzo's personal God with a white beard, outside time, without extension, outside space, etc. And so it seems that Mr. Godot might be this personal God. I know what Samuel Beckett said, but I'm going to be real. If he didn't want it to be God, he shouldn't have really made it seem like it was God.
Right. And so the idea that it's God, right, and to go back to the religion aspect, is that they're waiting for him. They're waiting for him with this blind faith. They could leave, or at least we think they could leave. They came in on a road. They could easily leave on the road. And Vladimir does. Every night he goes somewhere else. We haven't seen this because it's impossible to discuss such a long play in such short a time. But every night he goes away and then he comes back. He has Estragon. Apparently Estragon is beat up by this gang every single night. Again, a lot of like routine repetition type stuff that action could be taken but is not. But Vladimir chooses to come back every day and wait for God. So here, do we want to take a quick break? We'll talk about the very, very end of this, and then we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely. So we hope y'all have enjoyed our reading of Waiting for Godot so far. Stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. This is Exeter Jazz Lounge.
No, it's not. It will be soon, but nice try. Still School of Athens. I'm still Carter Otis.
I'm still Aavik Wadivkar. We are still waiting for our Charlie Scales.
Our Godot. So, before the end of the hour, let's discuss what happens at the end of this play.
All right. Well, we're finishing off. The boy leaves after Vladimir actually confronts him about, oh, wait, maybe Godot's God. And then after all of that, Vladimir and Estragon discuss a little. They actually begin to play with, and this is, of course, a very dark topic, but it is something very connected to existentialist philosophy. They begin to discuss the prospect of suicide.
Right. It seems like they're in this unescapable cycle, and they're saying, like, this would be the solution. This is how we would get out of this.
And they talk about it in a very facetious kind of way.
Right. A very nonchalant type of, almost as if, like, let's leave. It was kind of like, let's do this. They discuss the logistics, but it seems like they're lacking physical props for this, right? They're looking for a rope. They're wishing they had Lucky's rope, I believe, and they try some sort of thing where they're dangling each other off of a tree and it doesn't work and they fall. So that's where we'll pick it up to the end.
And then Vladimir finally says that, we'll hang ourselves tomorrow unless Godot comes.
And Estragon says, and if he comes?
And Vladimir says, we'll be saved. Saved as in Christian saved. We don't know, but I'd like to think so. Vladimir then takes off his hat, which actually was Lucky's hat that he stole from Lucky, peers inside, shakes it, just knocks it on the top, puts it back again. An action which changes nothing, does nothing, he still does it, and everything's the same.
Estragon says, well, shall we go?
Vladimir, put on your trousers.
Estragon, what?
Pull on your trousers.
You want me to pull off my trousers?
Pull on your trousers.
Estragon, realizing his trousers are down. True. He pulls up his trousers.
Well, shall we go?
Yes, let's go. They do not move. This is how the play ends, in the exact same spot where it started, both of the same characters, arguably little plot development. So what does it mean in the last couple of minutes that we have here? What's the point of all this? It seems so meaningless. Nothing changes from the start to the finish. They're both there. We've made it through both acts. Lucky and Pozzo have came. I mean, the only lasting difference is Vladimir now has Lucky's hat, which is magical, I guess, but we don't see any impact of that. They're waiting. They agree to keep waiting. And then Vladimir finally says, well, let's get out of here. And Estragon says yes, and then nothing happens. So what does this mean? What are we supposed to take away from this?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, but personally, I think that all of this kind of connects to well, not necessarily Camus' idea, but certainly a very depressing existentialist thing, if you really want to look at it like that, that nothing really does change. There is no meaning. There is no Godot. You will be forever waiting for this Godot if you so wish, be it God, be it meaning, be it purpose, without taking some kind of action yourself. And so Lucky and Pazzo keep coming back and forth, but if you see, they're not waiting. They are doing things, but they keep on coming across Vladimir and Estragon, forever stuck in this field, forever stuck in this day, the same thing day in, day out, waiting for this thing that'll never happen, never taking any action.
And Pazzo especially, right? He has control over Lucky. He even says, this is my land. He's assertive and he's dominant over Lucky especially, but over the pair of them as well, to say, this is my land, you're on my land. I'll let you stay on my land. But he has agency in life. He has responsibility. He takes actions. He has dreams. He has goals, and he accomplishes them, or he tries to. And the two of them, Vladimir and Estragon, don't. They're waiting. They're subordinate the entire time, and nothing happens. So
this is not to say that we condone slavery. School of Athens heavily does not condone slavery. Take control of your life, but please do not have any Lucky.
Yes, true. And take agency in your life. This is what Beckett is trying to say. Do the things. Do the things. Don't wait for life to happen to you, something grand to take hold of your life, and then everything will change for the better. That's not going to happen. You can't be stuck in the same cycle every day. That's just not how life works. You have to take control of your own life, do the things you want to do, and make the change that you want to see. And that's the only true way to live.
And that just about wraps it up. This is the last broadcast of the term. So we will be back.
We'll be back in the winter. Don't worry.
In about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. But for now, please don't miss us. We will be back. This has been School of Athens. I have been Aavik Wadivkar.
And you continue to be.
And you have been Carter Otis.
And I continue to be. And we continue to be without Charlie Scales for our